Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Sent a clear message to the
Did you know that Justin Trudeau wanted to hold military drills with China? He was forced to stop only under US pressure. Did you know that Switzerland had a secret deal to host Chinese spies? And it was the Swiss taxpayers who paid the bills. Do you know that the world vowed to make China pay for this pandemic, but is paying China big money for dubious vaccines? Tonight on Gravitas, we'll tell you why the world must prepare for the next Chinese pandemic even before this one ends, because governments are giving Beijing a free pass and lots of money. Forget justice for victims, for all of us. Forget punishment for a criminal cover-up. The world is filling China's coffers and signing secret deals with it. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you a special report. Also on the show, this is the future. Like oil and gold, Wall Street will start trading or has started trading water futures. This too is the future. France has given the go-ahead for bionic soldiers. Men and women in uniform enhanced technologically. But some things do not change with time. Even as the pandemic is taking lives, some countries are waiting for a halal vaccine. And there's no stopping SpaceX. The Starship crash lands, but Elon Musk declares mission accomplished. We'll tell you all about it. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
French President Emmanuel Macron has said that there is an urgent need to reform the country's security forces after weeks of nationwide protests over a controversial draft security law on taking photographs of the police, which critics say would curb documenting incidents of police brutality. President Macron's governing party said the draft article on filming police would be rewritten. In a letter to the police union, the French president said that it is urgent to act to beef up the trust between the French and the police. Gunmen shot and killed a female TV anchor, Malala Maiwand, in eastern Afghanistan on Thursday. The attackers opened fire on the journalist's car soon after she left her house. In addition to working as a TV and radio presenter, Maiwand was also an activist fighting for the rights of Afghan women and children. Ghana's opposition has rejected the presidential and parliamentary election results. The opposition National Democratic Congress now intends to take steps to appeal the Electoral Commission's decision. President Akufo-Addo won the vote with 51.59% of the votes. Reports quoting judicial sources indicate the Lebanon judge investigating the Beirut blast has charged outgoing Prime Minister Hassan Diab and former ministers Ali Hassan Khalil, Ghazi Zaitar and Youssef Fenianos with negligence causing the deaths of hundreds and leaving thousands others injured. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi performed a groundbreaking ceremony in the country's capital to inaugurate the new parliament building. The proposed building will cost roughly $130 million and is expected to be completed in time for the country's 75th Independence Day in August 2022. Pro-democracy protesters marked Thailand's Constitution Day by gathering around public spaces across the country's capital, calling for amendments to the Thai constitution. The protests coincided with the International Human Rights Day. A youth-led movement has held regular demonstrations for the past 5 months, demanding changes to the constitution and the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. Researchers believe they have found a previously unknown species of beaked whale in waters off Mexico's western coast. If confirmed, the new species would mark a significant discovery among giant mammals. The World Food Programme received the Nobel Peace Prize during a scaled-down digital ceremony. In November, the world's largest humanitarian organization was announced as this year's choice for the prestigious award for its efforts to combat hunger. Record 13-time winners Real Madrid have avoided crashing out of the Champions League group stage for the first time ever with a 2-0 victory over Borussia Mönchengladbach. After twin defeats to Shakhtar, Real needed a win to enter the last 16 and got it via two-headed goals from Karim Benzema. Mönchengladbach also qualified despite the defeat, but Inter Milan crashed out after a 0-0 draw against Shakhtar. France's Victor Perez leads the European Tour's season finale in Dubai after carding an opening round of 5 under. Perez had 6 birdies and a solitary bogey in his round and is 1 shot clear of a 3-way tie for second place. Current order of merit leader Patrick Reed started with a round of 2 under, while second-ranked Tommy Fleetwood is at 3 under and tied for 5th place.
It's been a year since China started the pandemic cover-up, but it has faced no punishment. So what is the world doing? Tonight we will tell you with 2 examples, Canada and Switzerland. Why these 2? Because today is World Human Rights Day and Canada has been preaching human rights to India. So we thought it's worth looking at their own record. And Switzerland has made a career out of calling itself a neutral country, the arbiter of disputes, the upholder of human rights. So we'll tell you what these 2 countries have been up to vis-a-vis China. Let's begin with Canada. Do you know that Justin Trudeau was very keen on hosting Chinese troops? A new report is making waves. It says Justin Trudeau wanted to engage with the Chinese military. He wanted the PLA to train with Canadian forces. The report has been published by a Canadian newspaper. It claims that the Trudeau government wanted to hold joint military drills with the Chinese. It had invited the PLA for winter military exercises, but the drills never happened. Why? Because the Canadian Chief of Defence Staff cancelled the plan. General Jonathan Vance seems to have gone against the will of the Trudeau government. The reason was pressure from the United States, Canada's neighbour and ally. America believed that drills like these could benefit the Chinese army. China is its adversary. America was right. And this, by the way, is common sense. So what was the Trudeau government thinking? Apparently, Prime Minister Trudeau, quote-unquote, raged at the Canadian Armed Forces for cancelling the training mission. That's the claim from a news outlet called Rebel News. Canada's relationship with China has gone downhill since Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer of Huawei. China hit back with the arrest of 2 Canadians. Canada spoke in support of Hong Kong protesters. China said Trudeau's Five Eyes alliance could be poked and blinded. Their words. Suffice to say, they're not friendly now. And Justin Trudeau is left to explain why he wanted military exercises with China in the first place. Then we come to Switzerland. And this is big. Switzerland and China struck a secret deal. A deal that allowed Chinese spies to operate freely on Swiss territory. A deal that made Swiss taxpayers foot the bill of Chinese spy operations in their country. They called it a readmission agreement. It was signed in 2015 for 5 years. The agreement expired on Monday. It may be renewed. Reports say that efforts to do this are underway. Switzerland kept this agreement a secret for more than 4 years. Finally, in August this year, it admitted that there was indeed such a deal with China. A human rights campaign group has shared an English translation of it. The deal laid out the terms for Chinese agents and how they will operate in Switzerland. And this is what it says. Chinese agents were allowed to travel to Switzerland. They were allowed to interview suspected Chinese nationals, the ones whom Switzerland wished to deport. All of this happened under a veil of secrecy. And this, we can tell you, is an unprecedented agreement, one that allowed for no oversight of Chinese spies on Swiss soil. No accountability for the methods they used or what they did with the deported individuals. Reports say this deal allowed the Chinese agents to travel unofficially. And here's something you must know. Europe has open borders. Once you enter Switzerland, you have access to the entire European Union. Even though Switzerland is not technically a part of the EU, it is covered under the Schengen visa. So you can travel almost anywhere on the continent. There is no telling where these Chinese spies went and what they did for the last 5 years. So what do these two stories tell us? No matter what China does, it gets a free pass in the free world. Because countries which preach others about rights and propriety bend over backwards to accommodate Beijing. And then there are countries which have suffered at the hands of China in more ways than one. The Wuhan virus, the diplomatic bullying, the military aggression. What are these countries doing? They're buying Chinese vaccines, believe it or not. Forget making China pay. They're paying money to China. And that too for vaccines that have not been authenticated. Our next report tells you how China is striking deals to sell unproven vaccines.
Xi Jinping is banking on these shots to repair China's global reputation. China wants to sell its vaccines to the world to erase the charges of a cover-up in Wuhan. It's a national priority. Officially, the Communist Party has said it on record. Wuhan virus vaccines are a national priority. Big money and resources have been invested. Now some candidates are ready to sell. So Beijing is using diplomacy to tap foreign buyers. As of November, Chinese vaccines had already reached 15 countries. They are under trial in these countries. The world knows little about these shots, but China is selling them by the lot, meeting the leading buyers. Chile, that won 60 million doses of Coronavac, a vaccine made by Chinese manufacturer Sinovac. Indonesia has placed orders for 50 million doses of Sinopharm's vaccine. Turkey, too, could buy up to 50 million shots of Chinese vaccines. At home, China has inoculated more than 1 million citizens with these vaccines, the biggest human trial in the world, because there is no solid clinical evidence of the efficacy of Chinese vaccines. Sinovac's Coronavac and Sinopharm's vaccine candidate are believed to be the front runners. According to medical journal The Lancet, Sinovac has only published data from the first and second phase of trials, while Sinopharm, that has distributed nearly 1 million shots already, hasn't published any data at all. Despite these concerns, governments are lining up to buy Chinese vaccines.
If you're living in one of the countries that is procuring these Chinese shots, then you must pay attention to this story. China's vaccines are controversial, not just because of the lack of data, but also due to the reputation of Chinese pharma giants. China's vaccine industry is plagued by corruption and controversy. It continues to thrive thanks to protection from the state. Sinopharm, one of the Chinese vaccine makers working on a shot for the Wuhan virus, was caught in a major scandal 2 years ago. We've been reporting on this. Its sister organization, the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products, made defective vaccines. They were injected into hundreds of thousands of babies, leading to a major scandal and public outrage. Tainted reputations seem to be the norm in China's pharma industry. Du Weimin, dubbed as the vaccine king of China, faces the charge of bribing regulators. Reports say he gave $44,000 in cash to government officials, to one government official in particular, for speedy approvals for his vaccines. The regulator was jailed. But this man, Du Weimin, was never charged. His company, Shenzhen Kangtai Biological Products, has now secured AstraZeneca's Wuhan virus vaccine. They will be the exclusive manufacturer for the shot in mainland China. And the track record of this company raises serious questions. Reports say in 2013, 17 infants died after they were given the company's hepatitis B shot. Chinese regulators cleared the company, acquitting it of any wrongdoing. The vaccine remained in use even after all those deaths. Investigators did not provide any specifics about their probe. This lack of transparency and dubious dealings would raise an alarm outside China, but with Beijing's blessing, China's shady vaccine manufacturers continue to remain in business. And with the Wuhan virus pandemic, they're now open for orders beyond China's borders. So we're going to ask you to take a quick look at the calendar. What's the date? It's the 10th of December. Exactly 9 months since the Wuhan virus was declared a pandemic. And almost every day in these 9 months, we have been telling the world to make China pay. Make China pay for killing more than 1.5 million people. Make China pay for making 69 million people ill. For bringing our lives to a standstill. For setting the global economy back by at least $15.8 trillion. Let those figures sink in. $15.8 trillion, that's what we have lost. For whitewashing an entire year. Make China pay for exporting a deadly virus. And guess what? The world has failed so far. Forget making China pay. The world is paying China, helping the virus exporter reach new economic heights. Listen to this. China is expected to account for 30% of the world's economic growth this year. China is expected to grow by 2% this year, the year of the pandemic. How did China get here? With our help. China claims to be the biggest trading partner to 130 countries and regions. Have any of these countries done anything to restructure the supply chains? The answer is no. China's economy has grown 3.2% in the second quarter, 4.9% in the third quarter. These are their figures. Nonetheless, China's GDP has been upgraded from stable to modestly improving. The global inaction has emboldened China. There's been a rather ironical role reversal. The criminal here is punishing its victims. China blocked pork imports from Germany. Do you know why? To warn Berlin against isolating Beijing. China banned beef imports from Australia. Do you know why? To punish Australia for questioning the origin of the Wuhan virus. What does this say about the global justice system? Here's another question. Do you recall any country slapping sanctions on China, and do not count the US, because American sanctions have nothing to do with this pandemic? And we'd say, don't bother thinking about others. Forget slapping sanctions. Countries are signing deals with China. China has already inked vaccine deals with Malaysia and the Philippines. It is constructing vaccine production facilities in Brazil, in Morocco, in Indonesia. China has promised a loan of $1 billion to Latin America and Caribbean nations. And let's get one thing clear. China's vaccine diplomacy is centered around profit. This is not philanthropy. And we are helping China make that profit. If China manages to capture just 15% of the market in middle and low-income countries, 15, then Beijing would net close to $3 billion in sales. So much for making China pay. Why are we so shy of punishing a country that ensured that recession touches all 5 continents on Earth? That pushed 400 million people out of their jobs? That permanently pulled the shutters on 98,000 companies? What explains the insincerity in holding China accountable? And just in case it has not sunk in, let me repeat it for the sake of world leaders. 1.5 million people have lost their lives to the Wuhan virus that China gave the world. 1.5 is not just a number. 1.5 million mothers, fathers, young children, spouses, siblings, they're dead. Do their loved ones not deserve justice? 400 million people have lost their livelihood. How will their families survive? Do these people not deserve justice? You and I have lost an entire year. Why? Because China covered up an outbreak. It exported a virus, and now we are rolling out the red carpet for Beijing. Why is China not being isolated? Why are Chinese goods not being boycotted? The world needs to give Beijing a befitting reply. And if we don't, then we should start preparing for the next pandemic. Do you know why? Because if we let China get away with full impunity with this one, it will strike back harder. So it's time to set a precedent. I've said it before, I will say it again. It is time to make China pay. Meanwhile, in France, the Defense Ministry is working on increasing the physical and cognitive abilities of French soldiers to fight wars. It has approved research on developing what they call enhanced soldiers, soldiers resistant to pain, soldiers who can stay awake for longer periods, who can tell their enemies from their allies. What technologies is France developing? Which other countries are doing the same? And where do ethics fit in the pursuit of power? Our next report explores.
If you thought soldiers with enhanced physical and cognitive powers were nothing more than science fiction, then brace yourself for what you're about to hear. The French army has been given the go-ahead to develop bionic soldiers, individuals resistant to pain, with magnified physiological skills and extra brain power. The Ethical Committee of the French Armed Forces has approved research on developing enhanced soldiers. It has ordered the development of technologies designed to improve battlefield performance. This includes microchip implants that will release calming substances, improve the cerebral capacity of soldiers, and help them tell enemy from ally. Research is also being done to create pills that will keep soldiers awake for long periods, and certain drugs that will make them resistant to pain, if held in isolation. The idea is being called the brainchild of the Defense Minister of France, Florence Parly. In a speech last week, Ms. Parly emphasized on the need to look ahead. She said, "France has no immediate plans to develop invasive technology for soldiers, but we must face facts. Not everyone shares our scruples, and we must be prepared for whatever the future holds. We must explore ways to maintain our operational superiority without turning our backs on values." France maintains that it will draw clear ethical lines for such technologies. Anything that could jeopardize the soldiers' integration into society will be rejected. The development comes barely days after reports emerged that some other nations are exploring such technologies. The US Director of National Defense, John Ratcliffe, has warned that China could be breeding genetically modified soldiers. He claimed that China is conducting human tests on PLA troops to develop soldiers with biologically enhanced skills. The claim is not far from the truth. In November 2019, the Global Times carried this report on how China was looking to build Iron Man suits that would let soldiers fly. And just 3 weeks back, it carried another report on Chinese scientists developing exoskeletons to enhance skills in high-altitude regions. The race for soldiers of the future is picking pace. Is there room for ethics in the pursuit of power? Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
And is there room for religion in science? Through this pandemic, we've made one appeal: put reason above religion. Tonight, we want to talk about halal vaccines. Yes, there is such a thing, halal vaccines. And some governments and people are waiting for a halal-certified Wuhan virus vaccine. Well, here's the thing. It's a miracle that there is a vaccine at all. It won't be easy for many countries to get a hold of it immediately. It's a life-threatening disease we're talking about, and science has run a race against time to achieve this. But some people still want a halal vaccine. 2 days back, we told you how Indonesia is expecting all vaccines to be halal certified. In other words, a vaccine that does not contain any ingredient that Islam does not permit its followers to consume, primarily alcohol and pork. The coordinating economic minister of Indonesia categorically stated that all vaccines will have to obtain a halal fatwa from the Ulema Council, the top clerical body in the country.
The implementation of vaccination still has to go through evaluation phases by the Food and Drug Agency to ensure quality, safety and effectiveness. In addition, it has to obtain halal fatwa from the Ulema Council.
Malaysia too has signed deals to procure shipments of a vaccine. Pfizer-BioNTech is expected to supply 12.8 million doses for 20% of the Malay population. But even before the vaccine arrives, clerics in Malaysia have begun raising concerns over its halal status. The Council for Malaysian Islamic Affairs has been holding meetings to discuss whether the vaccine can be administered to Muslims. A few days back, the Religious Affairs Minister, Muhammad Al-Bakri, said the decision would be announced after it has been presented to the King. The King oversees religious matters in this country. Today, the Malaysian government issued a new statement. It said that the halal issue will not affect the vaccine rollout. The Malaysian Health Ministry has said that it does not register a medicine based on its halal status, and this statement could trigger a huge controversy in the days ahead, because the halal issue, we can tell you, is a sensitive one in Malaysia. It has often raised tensions in the country. Malaysia's halal industry contributes to close to 8% of its GDP. Cases of fake halal certificates frequently make headlines in Malaysia. Social media claims that certain restaurants serve pork triggered a furor. Experts fear that the people will reject a vaccine that is not halal certified. We spoke to Azmi Hassan, a political analyst based in Kuala Lumpur, and this is what he told us.
Halal, not only on medicine or drugs, but also on food. It is very sensitive issues down here in Malaysia. As you are aware, we have a number of groups that are very anti-vaccine because they believe that the vaccine that existed before this are not halal from ingredients that are forbidden by our religion, Islam. So it is very sensitive, and the government has to tread it very carefully because we want as maximum as possible the most population of our country get vaccinated from this virus, COVID-19.
So the Malaysian government may give a go-ahead, but the Malaysian people, led by the clerics, may not accept non-halal vaccines, which brings us to a question. Is there a case at all for halal vaccines, especially during a pandemic? We decided to do some research, and this is what we found. In Islam, there are special considerations in times of emergency. A maxim of Islamic jurisprudence says that emergencies make the forbidden permissible. Let me repeat. Emergencies make the forbidden permissible. The world has never faced an emergency of this proportion in a long, long time. This pandemic has taken 1.5 million lives and infected 69 million people as of the 10th of December. The case for a vaccine must not be driven by the need to follow religion. Halal vaccines and halal certificates will only impede the fight against the Wuhan virus. And as Malaysia and Indonesia deal with this dilemma, it will be interesting to see where other Islamic nations stand on the matter. Now let's talk about the development that may change the world of social media as we know it. Will Mark Zuckerberg be forced to part with two of his crown jewels? An unprecedented lawsuit has been filed by the American government. It has sued Facebook. It wants to break up this company and force Mark Zuckerberg to sell Instagram and WhatsApp. Our next report tells you more.
It is the biggest social media company in the world. But if American government officials have their way, Facebook could be broken up. Mark Zuckerberg's internet empire faces its biggest challenge yet. The US government and 46 American states are suing Facebook. They claim the company is a monopoly and it must be broken up.
For nearly a decade, Facebook has used its dominance and monopoly power to crush smaller rivals and snuff out competition, all at the expense of everyday users. By using its vast troves of data and money, Facebook has squashed or hindered what the company perceived as potential threats. They've reduced choices for consumers. They stifled innovation, and they degraded privacy protections for millions of Americans. In an effort to maintain its market dominance in social networking, Facebook has employed a buy or bury strategy to impede competing services.
The American Federal Trade Commission is leading the government's charge. It is asking the courts to force Mark Zuckerberg to sell off Instagram and WhatsApp, two big internet products that Mark Zuckerberg bought from their founders. The acquisitions allowed Mark Zuckerberg to create a company that is a giant in the social media space. After acquiring Instagram in 2012 and WhatsApp 2 years later, Facebook has become virtually inescapable for anyone on the internet. Across platforms, the company has more than 3 billion users. With Facebook, the company now valued at more than $800 billion. If Facebook loses the lawsuit, it could fundamentally remake the social media industry, even the internet at large. Big tech has been on target of Capitol Hill, with several American lawmakers arguing that tech giants have become too big to regulate. This year, a committee of lawmakers investigated the practices of big tech. In their report, they said Amazon, Apple, Facebook and Google have abused their monopoly power and deserve to be broken up. The lawsuit against Facebook is a step in that direction. For the past 4 years, the company has faced one scandal after another, forcing Facebook's founder and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, to face a grilling by lawmakers on multiple occasions. The ordeal for Zuckerberg began in 2016. When his platforms failed to rein in misinformation during the US presidential election. 2 years later, the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke, revealing a data breach that affected millions of users. The same data was used to target and influence voters. 2018 was the year that Zuckerberg would like to forget. After Cambridge Analytica, Facebook was accused of being a vehicle to incite a genocide in Myanmar. A year later, Zuckerberg's company was slapped with a fine of $5 billion for violating user privacy. This was a record-breaking fine for a tech company. Now Facebook faces the charge of buying companies to kill market competition. With the lawsuit, Zuckerberg faces an uphill battle to save the company he created in his Harvard dorm room. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
That's not the end of Facebook's troubles. The dream run is ending for big tech on other fronts too. Let me tell you something about the news business. Media organizations like ours invest money. We invest money, time and effort to create content, the news you see. Tech companies display this content. So you consume this news on Google, on Facebook, on Twitter and elsewhere. These tech companies get ads on their content. Facebook and Google do. But they don't share this money. this ad money. They do not pay media companies. They do not share ad revenue. They become richer on the content that they did not create. In Australia, they will now have to change their ways. The government of Australia has decided to make Google and Facebook pay for news. This is a world first and long overdue, if I may add. Australia has tabled a law that will force Google and Facebook to negotiate a fair payment with news organizations for using their content. That is content in Facebook's newsfeed and Google's search.
Reform. This is a world first. And the world is watching what happens here in Australia. But our legislation, which will be introduced in the Parliament tomorrow and then go to a committee, a Senate committee, our legislation will help ensure that the rules of the digital world mirror the rules of the physical world. That's been our intention all along, to ensure that the rules of the digital world mirror the rules of the physical world, and ultimately to sustain our media landscape here in Australia.
Why was this law necessary? Let me explain through an example. For every $100 of online advertising, $53 goes to Google. That's more than half the money, the ad revenue. $28 go to Facebook. So what's left for the others? $19 divided among everyone else. Now, this loss of advertising revenue gets partially offset by subscriptions. If you subscribe to a news outlet, they make that money. But that's not enough. Media organizations suffer due to the monopoly of tech giants. Journalists across the world have left the industry. Media outlets have gone broke. Some have shut down. But Google and Facebook have done very well. In Australia, Google made $4.8 billion in advertising revenue last year. $4.8 billion. Facebook made more than $500 million. This is according to documents filed with the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. Now, these platforms make money from news and analysis provided by media organizations. They take that away, Google and Facebook will be much less helpful. Australia's new law is aimed at ensuring that news businesses are fairly remunerated, that they get paid for the content that they generate.
Comprehensive legislation that has gone further than any comparable jurisdiction in the world. And what we've put in place is a final offer arbitration model that is fair and it's balanced in the sense that it takes into account two-way value exchange.
So how did these platforms react to the law? As soon as the news came out, Facebook warned that it might block Australian news content rather than pay for it. Google said the law would result in, quote-unquote, dramatically worse search and YouTube streaming. They say this is justified because they have made investments in the news industry to help them survive during this pandemic. Well, here's the thing. Yes, Google and Facebook give legs to news content. Yes, they take the story beyond geographical limits beyond media organizations' reach. But if the disseminator makes all the money and shares mere peanuts with the producer of the content, how will news production survive? What will they share with you if media outlets cannot create news? Facebook and Google produce zero content of their own. They're merely aggregators. On the other hand, media companies hire journalists. They pay for infrastructure, they invest time, they invest money in news, they create content, while Google and Facebook aggregate all of this content and take up the lion's share of the advertising revenue for themselves. How fair is that? Australia's proposed legislation is a step in the right direction. The government of India perhaps can also take a cue and create a level playing field here. It must break the monopoly of big tech and make them pay for news. The Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict is far from over. It's been exactly a month since the two countries signed a peace deal on Nagorno-Karabakh. There's a ceasefire on paper, but the war of words continues. Yerevan has accused Baku of using phosphorus bombs during the fight. The president of Azerbaijan, on the other hand, has said that his country will not be shy of, quote-unquote, breaking Armenia's back with an iron fist. It comes at a time when the man who fueled this 6-week war landed in Baku to survey the ruins. I'm talking about Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Here's a report.
Yerevan's hospitals are flooded with injured soldiers, many of them with severe burn injuries. Armenia says neighboring Azerbaijan used chemical weapons during the Nagorno-Karabakh fighting. Phosphorus ignites on contact with air. If inhaled, it can burn the lungs. Patients often face metabolism problems, sometimes even heart attacks. The use of phosphorus is tightly regulated under an international agreement, but neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan are party to it.
Պերեսի մարտագիրտ դրանից դոստեի մեկ է ես վեճի շրջանում եմ գիտեցե երկու շաբաթ ընթացքում որ ֆոսֆորի հետ կմեց վերջները եւ ամեն ինչ անում են որ բուժեն
ուրալով են եղել ֆելին ուրալին ցեն չեմ դուսել չեմ նկատել մենակ այդ կրակն եմ նկատել.
The use of phosphorus can be classified as a war crime. Baku says it never used any. The man who fueled the conflict went to survey the ruins. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is on a 2-day visit of Azerbaijan.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
He received a hero's welcome in Baku. He reviewed a parade where Baku displayed destroyed Armenian vehicles and dished out hate in plenty.
Bundan sonra eğer Ermeni faşizmi bir daha baş kaldırsa neticede eyni olacak. Yine Azerbaycan demir yumruğu onların belini kıracak.
Erdogan provided military and diplomatic support to Azerbaijan during the conflict. He praised Baku's operations and cheered, quote-unquote, brotherly Azerbaijan with all our means and all our hearts. Over 5,000 troops died in 6 weeks of fighting.
Batılı emperyalistlerin gaz vermesiyle bir yere varılmayacağı görülmeli. Düşmanlık yerine iyi komşuluk temelinde ilişkiler yeniden ele alınmalıdır. Ermenistan halkı Karabağ'da yaşananlardan ders çıkarırsa bu bölgede yeni bir dönemin başlangıcı olacaktır.
Karabakh is internationally recognized as a part of Azerbaijan. Until recently, it was populated and controlled by ethnic Armenians. The recent conflict erupted on the 27th of September. On the 10th of November, Russia brokered a peace deal. Broad strips of territory of Nagorno-Karabakh were handed over to Azerbaijan. It also pushed Armenia into an internal conflict. As troops in Baku marched to mark their victory, in Yerevan, thousands have taken to the streets demanding Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan step down. All this because one man couldn't keep himself from adding fuel to the fire. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
SpaceX's latest rocket test has ended in a ball of fire. Every part of the flight went according to plan, but they just couldn't ace the landing. SpaceX, though, is not too disappointed. The company's founder, Elon Musk, says they've learned a lot from this crash. Our next report traces the events leading up to it, and I can tell you this, for all of Elon Musk's eccentricities, there is something to learn from him too. He just doesn't seem to give up.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
A perfect launch. A smooth 5-minute flight. A possible descent. But a horrible touchdown. This is the story of SpaceX's latest test run. A prototype called the Starship. Meant to be a galactic workhorse, a go-to rocket for the company's planned missions to Mars. SpaceX claims it can carry 100 tons of cargo. Maybe it can. But Wednesday's test made one thing clear. The landing gear needs a lot of work. The test was off to a good start. The rocket lifted off in a straight line. The Starship then cruised for around 5 minutes. Before beginning its descent, so far, so good. As the rocket honed in on the landing pad, the thrusters started firing again. This is crucial to slowing down the rocket and avoiding a crash landing. But things did not go to plan. The Starship crashed into the landing pad, bursting into a fireball upon impact. Mission failed. But SpaceX was upbeat. This was the message flashing on their live stream. Awesome test, congrats Starship team. Not as convincing with the smoking debris in the backdrop.
The whole world
Elon Musk later said the company had got all the data it needed. So are these multi-million-dollar tests just a learning curve for SpaceX? If they are, it's proving to be a long curve. Because this is not the first time a SpaceX operation has ended in disaster.
6, 5, 4,
2006,
3,
SpaceX's first ever launch.
0, +1, +2, +3, +4, +5.
33 seconds in, the rocket explodes.
Copy.
The cause? A rusty nut. In 2008, SpaceX was ferrying its first payload for NASA. Also on board were the ashes of Star Trek star James Doohan. But when the rocket stages separated, they collided with each other. The cargo ended up in sea. 2015, Elon Musk's worst birthday ever. A SpaceX rocket vaporizes shortly after launch. The NASA cargo on board is blown to smithereens. In 2016, they lost a rocket even before launch. A refueling error causing the vehicle to explode. So, Elon Musk is no stranger to failure. But that's what many find inspiring about him. Despite repeated disasters, SpaceX has soldiered on. It successfully completed a crewed flight to the International Space Station. No easy feat for a private company. As for the Starship project, the next prototype is almost complete. So another experimental flight is not far away. The Starship project is crucial to SpaceX's Mars mission. It could also be used in NASA's 2024 lunar mission. But the earliest deployment is a commercial one. Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa is slated to take the Starship on a ride around the moon. Let's hope the glitches are resolved before that maiden flight. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Since we're talking about futuristic things, water is the new oil, or should I say the new gold. I say this because water has joined both oil and gold on the Wall Street. It is now officially being traded. You may ask why, and the answer is climate change. Water shortage. The price of water has gone up across the world. In California, it has doubled in 1 year. Recent droughts and wildfires have made matters worse. So an American company called the CME Group has added water to the futures market. For the uninitiated, what is a futures market? It's basically an auction market. So you buy and sell today for delivery in future. The price is set today, but the commodity is delivered in future. The idea is for you to bet on how well a product will sell at a future date and set a price for it today. Now, this kind of trading is done for oil and gold. Futures trading, they call it. Now it will be done for water too. This American company has launched contracts related to California spot water. The announcement was made in September, right after the wildfires. The trade began on the 7th of December. The price of water futures in California traded for about $486.53 per acre foot. The index is based on prices in California's major river basins. This market in California is worth $1.1 billion. We're talking about water here. So it's safe to say that in California, water is now a commodity, a traded commodity, an asset. And going forward, the price of water will fluctuate, just like the price of gold or oil. And investors will be able to bet on the future of water prices. What does this mean for those living in California? Well, those who are in favor of trading water say that this move will clear uncertainty around water prices. It will help farmers and authorities budget for water and also allow for better management. Then there are some who say that water should not be made a tradable commodity because it puts basic human needs under the control of financial institutions. One expert compared it to betting on the suffering of others. What does it mean for those who are not in California? It's an indication for all of us. This is what the future holds. It may just be a matter of time before water hits markets around the world. 2 billion people live in countries plagued with water problems. Nearly 2/3 of the world is expected to face water shortage by 2025, and that's just 4 years away. Households, businesses, farmers, everyone is expected to feel the pinch. So it is safe to make water a tradable commodity, is it? Or is there a better approach to water security? It has long been said that the next war will be fought over water. We can only hope that it doesn't come to that. Think about it. We'll wrap up the show, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.